Hello there, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Samantha, and this is my channel where I talk all about books. And today I'm coming to you with my best books of 2020 video, which I know is delayed, and I actually have a couple of videos coming up which are still like end of the year / beginning of the year videos, which obviously I should have posted a little bit earlier on this month or at the end of last month. But I did do a community post about this, but maybe you didn't see it or maybe you're brand new here. But basically I am in my final year of university. My semester 1 deadlines are always at the beginning of January, so I end up having to spend the end of the year and the beginning of the year working on my essays, and unfortunately I literally spent an entire 2 weeks glued to my laptop doing essays all day every day. And yeah, basically I just didn't have time to film the videos and edit them and stuff like that whilst doing my essays. And as I've said before, like, my education comes first at the moment because it's my last year. After this, hopefully next year I'll be able to get these videos up on time for once. Anyway, that's why this video is late and why the next 2 videos that I'll be posting should have gone up earlier this month but didn't. Anyway, that is enough prefacing. Today I'm talking about my 10 best books of the year. I read a total of 89 books last year, which is quite a lot, but I actually didn't have the best reading year in terms of ratings. I feel like a lot of the books that I read were pretty average, but the 10 books that I'm going to be talking about were all pretty great, and I'm pretty excited to talk about them all today. But if you missed it, I did actually post the opposite of this video. I posted the worst books of the year a couple weeks ago, so if you're interested, I'll link that up in the card if you want to watch both. Have a bit of balance between the negative and the positive. But yes, we're going to focus on the positive today and talk about my 10 favorite books of last year. So coming in at number 10 on my list is Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. This is the first book in the Trials of Morgan Crow trilogy. But if you don't know, this is a middle grade series that follows our main character, Morgan Crow, and she was born on this cursed day, and she's destined to die on her 11th birthday, I think. But just before midnight on the day before her birthday, she gets whisked away by this guy called Jupiter North, and she's basically taken to this place called Nevermore and given the opportunity to join the Wondrous Society. And in order to do that, she has to go through some trials, which is one of my favorite book tropes. I don't know why, but I just really enjoy reading that particular trope. And yeah, that's the basic premise of this book. I really loved this book. It was such a fun, adventurous story. It was also like had quite a dark atmosphere to it, which I really enjoyed. I think if you like City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab, you'll like this one, because even though the plot is entirely different, I think that they are quite similar in like tone and atmosphere. Like, they're both, I don't know, they're just both kind of dark, and I really like that. But yeah, it was just a really fun story. I really enjoyed all the characters. I haven't continued on in the series yet, and I think I'm gonna have to reread the first book before I continue on, but I do hope to do that at some point this year because I really enjoyed that book. Coming in at number 9 on my list is Challenger Deep by Neal Shusterman. This book surprised me by how much I enjoyed it, especially because the first half of this book I wasn't that into it, and it took me all the way until about 50%, and then I was like, oh, I actually really like this. If you don't know what this book is about, this is a young adult contemporary novel following our main character, Caden, and basically this book is kind of told in like 2 different plot lines. The first is Caden's actual life when he's in high school, and then also his experience in a psychiatric hospital. And the second is Caden on this ship to go to Marianas Trench and to go to the deepest part of the world. This book was just really beautifully written, and I really appreciated the fact that this book is something that's really personal to Neal Shusterman, because this book follows schizophrenia, and one of Neal Shusterman's sons has schizophrenia, so he worked closely with him to create this story, and the images that were used throughout were images that were done by his own son. And I just thought that this was so beautiful, so well done. I really enjoyed it, and I think that this book definitely deserves more hype. This book came out in 2015, and I really haven't seen that many people talking about it. Obviously, Neal Shusterman's a pretty well-known author now because of the Arc of Aside series, and so I feel like this book deserves as much love as those books, but it doesn't get it, so definitely check this book out if it sounds at all interesting to you. It was really, really well done. Coming in at number 8 on my list, I have Poems for the End of the World by Katie Wismer. If you don't know, I've talked about this quite a few times, but I love Katie's first poetry collection, The Sweetest Kind of Poison. I think I've read it like 4 times. I'm just low-key obsessed with it, and she released this new poetry collection this year, and I was actually lucky enough to get an ARC of it and got to read it before it came out, and I just absolutely loved this. I would highly recommend both of her collections because she has such a beautiful way with words. The poems are just all beautiful. Like, there isn't a single poem in this that I don't like. They're just all absolutely gorgeous, and obviously this cover is equally gorgeous. There were so many things in here that I could relate to. There was also a lot of stuff that I couldn't personally relate to, but it was still just so beautiful to read. It was raw and wonderful. A lot of this book is kind of like being in like your early 20s, and obviously that's something I can relate to, being in my early 20s. I find it kind of hard to like review poetry collections, but if you like poetry, I would definitely recommend this book as well as her first collection. They're both phenomenal, and yeah, this was definitely one of my favorites of the year. Coming at number 8 on my list is A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir. I'm sorry I don't have the dust jacket because I left it at university and I'm stuck at home because we're in another lockdown here. This is the third book in the An Ember in the Ashes series. I've been one of the co-hosts of the Ember Along. I'm sure that if you've been on my channel before, you know that because I've mentioned it a lot, but if you haven't heard about it, we were doing a read-along of the entire Ember in the Ashes series, and our live show for the last book is going to be on the 23rd of January, so you still have time to read the last book and join us if you want. But this was definitely my favorite book in the Ember in the Ashes series so far. I haven't actually read the last book, but I will obviously before the live show happens. But I really enjoyed this book for the most part. I will say it did take me quite a while to get into it, but I think that was also due to like my circumstances because I was kind of in a bit of a reading slump. But the second half of this book was just so action-packed. There were so many twists and turns. I cannot wait to read the last book. I can't believe I haven't yet, but obviously I will be doing it really soon. Basically, I'm just really bad at synopsizing this book for some reason, and of course because I'm 3 books in, I feel like I'm going to spoil things. I'm just going to direct you to the Goodreads page and you can find out what it's about there, but I'm sure you guys know what it's about because this series has been so widely talked about, especially last year with the final book coming out and everything. It's basically a Roman-inspired fantasy which follows 2 characters, and it is just so good, very well constructed, and I just love all of these characters. Whilst this isn't like my favorite series of all time, I do really enjoy the characters. I don't know what is stopping me from like claiming this is one of my favorites of all time, but it's just one of those things where I enjoy my time reading it, but there's just something holding me back from like fully loving it. So that's why it's not higher on this list, but I do think that this book in particular was very well done, and I really enjoyed reading it this year. Coming in at number 6 on my list is Aphrodite Make Me Do It by Tristan Mattier. This is another poetry collection. I think I read this back in June. I saw this on Scribd and I picked it up on a whim. I had no idea what it was about, but I think I'd seen like one person talk about it one time, and it just stuck in my brain. So when I saw it on Scribd, I picked it up and I fell in love with this poetry collection. This was so beautiful. There were so many poems that I could relate to. What I found really interesting about this collection was that it was told in a really unique type of way, wherein we had one section which was told from like Aphrodite's point of view, and the next section was like the poet kind of responding to that and building on what Aphrodite had said in her section. I just thought it was a really unique way to format the collection. I really enjoyed reading this, and I really want to buy a physical copy so I can own it, because as I said, I read this on Scribd, so I don't even have an ebook copy that is my own. So yeah, I would really like to get my own copy so I can annotate it and love it and appreciate it. It also is like just one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen. That is number 6 on my list. Coming in at number 5 on my list, we have Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I'm sure you've heard about this book because this is another one that's been talked about a lot on BookTube this year. But if you don't know, this book follows 2 sisters, Yahaira and Camino. Yahaira lives in New York and Camino lives in the Dominican Republic, and they don't actually know about the existence of the other one until their father dies in a plane crash, and then that brings them together. This book is told in verse, and it was just stunning. The themes of like sisterhood and like women supporting each other that were in this book was just like immaculate. I loved this book. I also feel like Elizabeth Acevedo did a good job of distinguishing between Yahaira's perspective and Camino's perspective. Like, I never got confused about which one was speaking. I just really loved this. It was beautifully written. I also read The Poet X this year, which I really enjoyed as well, but I think Clap When You Land was like my favorite of those 2 that I read. I have the audiobook for With the Fire on High, and I'll definitely be listening to that at some point this year because I just want to read anything and everything that Elizabeth Acevedo writes because she's just one of my new favorite authors, I think. Coming at number 4 on my list is a book that I really have not spoken about enough on my channel. I read it in August, and for some reason I don't even think I've mentioned it since, but I really loved this book, and it was such a shock for me because this is a genre that I don't typically read that much of, but it definitely makes me want to read more of this genre. But that book is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is a YA mystery which follows our main character Avery, who is just trying to make it through high school. She doesn't have a lot of money, and she just wants to finish high school, get a scholarship to a good university, and just kind of leave her life behind. And one day she's sitting in class and she's called to the principal's office and told that she's basically inherited the entire fortune of this billionaire who she's never heard of before. The only catch is that she has to go and live in his mansion with his family. And obviously the family that he's left behind are not very excited to have her in the house. They all think that they should have inherited the money, and obviously it's quite a dangerous situation for her because she's worried for her life because the whole family are mad that they didn't get this money. So it just kind of follows her in the house, and the man who died was really into like puzzles and games, so that's a big element of it. Throughout the novel you're trying to figure out like why she inherited this money and like is someone out to get her, and it is just like so captivating. I couldn't put it down. I finished it so quickly. One of the taglines was like, this book is perfect for fans of the film Knives Out, and that is 100% correct. If you liked that film, you are going to love this book. It was just really good, and it's actually the first book in a duology, I think, which kind of sucks because like I want the next book now, but yeah, this book was just really good and I would highly recommend. Okay, now we're moving on to my top 3 books of the year. So if you want to like pause and take a guess of what you think my top 3 books of the year are going to be, you should do that now. I think 2 of these are really obvious if you've been watching my videos like throughout the year because I've mentioned them pretty consistently. And then one of these books I've actually barely mentioned because I read it a little bit later on in the year, so you might not be able to guess that one. Take a guess now and then continue on the video. Alright, so coming in at number 3 on my list is Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid. This is the one that I think is going to be a little bit of a surprise. I absolutely adored this book. I flew through it. It kind of surprised me a little bit because I thought I was going to like it, but I didn't realize that I was going to love it as much as I did. If you don't know what this book is about, this book basically follows our main character Amira, and basically Amira is a babysitter for this family, and one day they call her up like late at night and ask her to take their child Briar to the supermarket because the police are going to be coming over to the house and they don't want Briar around that. So Amira goes and takes Briar to the supermarket. When she's in the supermarket, she's basically accused of kidnapping this child because Amira is black and the child is white. So she's accused of kidnapping this child and she's like stopped by the security guard in the store. So this book follows the aftermath of that with like the reaction of the white woman who Amira works for, who is basically trying to be like an ally, but really it's just a lot of performative activism. And that's basically like where the story takes off, and we just kind of see like the development of the situation, and there's stuff that you know as a reader, like you know how things are going to go, but you don't know how it's all going to come to a head. And it was just like one of the most compelling reads ever. Like I did not want to put it down because I was just so enthralled by the characters and the situation and seeing how it was going to develop and all come to a head. And yeah, this book was just so good. It was just phenomenal. If you haven't read this book, you really should. I really enjoyed reading about these characters. I just thought it was really interesting to see like their motivations, and yeah, I just really enjoyed this book a lot. It definitely deserves all the hype that it's getting, and it deserves more hype. I think everyone should read this book. It was just so good. And yeah, it was one of my favorite books of the year. I really want to buy a physical copy because I read this from the library. But yeah, I'd really love to own this because I really want to reread it. Anyway, it was just really great, and I think you should all pick it up if you haven't already because it was so good. Coming in at number 2 on my list is one of my new favorite books of all time, and it is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I read this book back in May and I fell in love with this book. I'm sure everyone knows what this book is about because it is such an old book. I think it came out in like 2005 or something like that. But if you don't know, this book is set in Nazi Germany. It follows our main character, Liesel, who goes to live with a foster family. And it's just quite a slow moving story about Liesel, who throughout the novel, she steals some books, and that's why it's called The Book Thief. It's narrated by Death as he like follows Liesel's life for quite a few years. And it is a beautiful story. It is absolutely heartbreaking. It was quite a weird one because I started reading it and the writing style was so different from what I normally enjoy that I really thought I was going to hate it. I didn't know if I was actually going to be able to finish this book, but after I got like, I don't know, like 20 pages in, I got used to the writing style and I really appreciated it. I thought it was absolutely gorgeous, and this story is my everything. If you haven't read it, you should, because it's beautiful and heartbreaking, and I really want to reread it this year, even though I know I just read it, but I really want to reread it because it was so good. And it really reminded me that I need to read more historical fiction because it's one of my favorite genres and I just never read it, mainly because it's sad. But yeah, I definitely want to read some more historical fiction as well as rereading this beautiful book. And my number 1 book of the year was the one, the only, The Toll by Neal Shusterman. Is anyone surprised? No. I know I've talked about the Arc of Aside series so many times on my channel. So if you watch my videos frequently, you know what this series is about. You know I love it. I should stop going on about it, and I promise I will at some point someday. Although probably not that soon, because if you missed it, my last video was the announcement for the Scythe-along, because I'm going to be rereading this trilogy with Mel and Noelle. So I'll link that video up in the card in case you want to know more about it. But yeah, unfortunately I won't be shutting up about it anytime soon because I do have that read along coming up. But yeah, this was my favorite book of the year. I loved this book. This is the third and final book in the Arc of Scythe trilogy, and actually a lot of people were very disappointed by this book. I will say that this book went in the direction that I didn't want it to go in, but it was also like the only option for the conclusion, I think. Like, I wanted it to go differently, but it made sense, and if he had done what I wanted him to do, it just would have had to be like much longer and it just wouldn't have made sense. So yes, it was the only way the series could have ended, and I just think it was just so expertly done, and I loved every page of it pretty much. This book was fantastic. If you haven't read the Arc of Scythe trilogy yet, you are missing out, and you should start reading it next month with me and Mel and Noelle. I realized I've put Neal Shusterman on this list twice, so I'm sorry about that, but I'm also not sorry because this book was phenomenal, Challenger Deep was phenomenal, and basically all of the books that I mentioned in this video were fantastic, and you should add all of them to your 2021 reading list because they all deserve a read. But yes, those were all of my favorite books of the year. Again, I'm sorry that this video is coming out later than it should. Please let me know what some of your favorite books of the year were down below. I would love to know. I would love some recommendations. But that's all that I have for this video, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe down below, and I upload videos on Sundays, so I will see you next Sunday. Bye! I need some agua. Yeah. And Avery is kind of like, you're fucking kidding me. You're fucking kidding me. I hate my life. I don't know what I'm saying.